Welcome to Parent University for Indian Prairie District 204. This segment is based on school safety and security. You'll get an inside look at the role that our school resource officers play, the law enforcement drills that we do within the school, the ALICE response options that we utilize to keep students and staff safe, and the reunification method that we'll utilize when we need to get students back to families after a critical incident. Hello, and with me today is the Aurora PD SRO unit. I have Sergeant Tom McNamara, Officer Danny Rios. I have Officer Ray Morris from Waubonsie Valley, Officer Jay Leonardi from Mattia Valley. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what a SRO does throughout the daily basis in our schools and how they help our schools. So Tom, tell us a little bit about the composition of the APD SRO unit for District 204.
So the School Resource Officer unit for the Aurora Police Department is currently comprised of 9 full-time officers within 13 different schools. However, that is split between 3 out of our 4 public school districts within our jurisdiction. How School District 204 fits into that is that we have 1 full-time officer at each of the high schools, being Waubonsie Valley and Mattia Valley. And then we have 1 school resource officer that is split between the 3 middle schools within our jurisdiction.
Gotcha. And so, of course, everybody in 204 knows that we have 4 different law enforcement entities. Bolingbrook has one of our schools, DuPage County Sheriff, Aurora and Naperville comprise the most. And next year our plan is to highlight Naperville PD and their SRO units. So today we're doing that. And Danny Rios, can you talk a little bit about your role and where you're coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Fisher, Granger, and Still Middle School. I basically ensure safety, security, work with faculty, excuse me, with my administrative teams. Obviously, we work collaboratively to ensure the safety, security. We also, I do a lot of patrols, a lot of engaging, making sure that, the school itself, obviously, locked doors, and that obviously our students are safe within the buildings. And then ultimately, I also kind of help mold and engage and educate the students when it comes toward our laws and our standards and procedures on how to properly conduct themselves within our buildings, so that way when they then transition from the middle school settings over to the high school settings, they have a good understanding on how to properly behave.
Good. So Ray Morris from Waubonsie.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about a day in the life at Waubonsie.
So a day in the life at Waubonsie. Well, first and foremost, when I get here, traffic is an issue for us. Eola Road typically gets backed up, and because we're a high school, most of our students are driving. So what I like to help out with is getting all the buses in. Most of our buses come from the south, and they have to cross over Eola Road. So what I do is I'll stop traffic every time the buses come. We'll get like 5 or 6 buses in the turning lane. I'll stop traffic coming southbound so that all the buses get in, and then just making sure that traffic is flowing properly into the school. And then basically throughout the day, like Danny said, I'm safety and security within the school, walking around, checking doors, greeting the kids, talking to students, teachers and staff, and mainly just keeping all those positive relationships between the police department and the students throughout the day, maintaining security.
Perfect. Jay Leonardi, Mattia Valley.
Yep, just like Officer Morris, my focus is safety and security. At the beginning of the day, I focus on traffic in the parking lot. My school is along Eola Road, just like Waubonsie, so we're making sure that kids get to school safely, making sure that I'm just a presence so that people passing the school know that I'm there so they're not speeding, and making sure that our kids can cross the street safely. And then when I get into the school, I'm greeting the students, talking to staff, talking to the deans, talking to the principal, giving them an update on anything that may have happened the night before involving our students. And then throughout the day, I'm walking the halls, talking to teachers, giving presentations in class related to law enforcement, and then just being a presence and being a resource ultimately.
Perfect. So all 3 you mentioned building relationships, and that's a key point for our SRO unit, and that's why we have school resource officers and police officers within the schools. You tell us a little bit, Danny, and we'll go back around. Like, what are some of the things that you do? I've been with you personally when we're in the hallways. Kids, love your presence. So tell us a little bit about what you do to build that positive relationship between the students and law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I find that easiest during my lunchroom times. right? It's a little more unstructured than being in a classroom, or even in the hallways, kids are trying to, rush from point A to point B, so there's really little time to actually engage. But I make sure that I'm in the lunchrooms. That's my time to sit with students, chit-chat, conversate about, their likes, dislikes, sports, academics, home life, and you'd be surprised what the kids love to share. And not only that, then they'll obviously have the opportunity to also then ask me any questions about my job, what I do, and then sometimes they'll, get into the personal questions. Do you have kids? Do you have dogs? Do you have this, right? So for me, that's my way to then obviously connect with these kids and then bridge those good relationships between law enforcement and our students. And that goes a long way. And we see it a lot even when we do extracurriculars, whether it's football games or whatever, these kids come find us and have conversation with us.
That's a lot of what Danny just said, that's a lot of what I do, building those relationships in the lunchroom, not just being a body in the lunchroom and standing over them, but actually getting at that level and at their level and sitting down and eating with them, talking over sports or talking about family or things that they're doing in school like that. Also here we have a program that we run called Warrior Connections. It's a mentoring program, which I'm a part of, and a lot of the other staff here is a part of it as well. And basically we just mentor. We have upperclassmen kind of mentor the underclassmen on how it is to be new to high school and how to navigate through high school. So that's something else that we do, sort of like a community engagement type thing within the school.
And then kind of going back to the positive interactions, there's been plenty of times where I've had to deal with a student because maybe they got into a fight or they brought a vape to school and we have to issue maybe a citation or they may end up going to jail. But the next day, they always come through the hallways, fist bump me, shake my hand. So we're just able to have those positive interactions and take it one step further compared to patrol officers on the street where maybe they interact with the student once and then they never see that student again. So I think that's one of the biggest things about being an SRO and one of the most positive.
Another thing that you guys have all touched on are the relationships with the kids. But from my aspect, sitting back at my desk, I actually see your relationships with the staff and the administration of each school as equally as important as what you guys are doing day to day out in the hallway, in the lunchrooms, on the playground, at the extracurriculars. I've noticed that staff is more open to just come to you guys with problems, which is kind of falls into our see something, say something aspect of safety within the schools especially. And the staff having that feeling that they can come to you guys, I think kind of heads off a lot of problems ahead of time. So it's just one of the relationship aspects that I see that maybe you guys don't even think about. Same with parents. In your reports, you guys, the way you interact with the parents whenever a child needs that interaction. Sometimes it's negative, there's discipline involved. A lot of times it's positive. I've even seen parents reach out to you guys proactively and say, hey, my child is having an issue with this. Is there anything you can maybe tell me to help me at home, or is there anything you can inform me about that my child might need at school? So those are things that I think don't get looked at a lot, but definitely occur.
And just really having that open communication too. If a student is involved in something outside of school that may transpire into something bigger at school, we're able to have those open conversations with the staff and with the parents. And sometimes I've had back and forth with parents multiple times a week because something is happening outside of school. So just like the sergeant said, having those open lines of communication, it really goes a long way.
And that's a great point that Jay just made, is that this is not a 7 to 3 or whatever your school is, or 3:30. We often do things, whether it's a missing student or a student in distress, and we work together as a district and with police officers, our law enforcement, to make sure we bring about kind of that positive ending. So this could be on a weekend, at night. I feel like we're always kind of available for that. So another thing you guys touched on was the staff part, and I've always felt as the SROs as part of a faculty member. We didn't want you to come into the schools and just be law enforcement, right? We wanted you to be like any other staff member. You all pointed out about teaching classes, instructing. I've seen driver's ed and health and other places. Can you guys run me around that really quick, some things that you've done from the instructional part?
Sure, yeah. So there's a business class that they teach here, and the instructor likes me to come in and just give basics on law enforcement, and the law. So I've done that the last school year.
Okay.
And same with me. Every year, actually a couple times a year, at the beginning and the end of the year, I teach in our driver's ed course just basic rules of the road and some of the major infractions that we see as law enforcement that we want our young people to pay attention to. And then also in our social studies courses, I teach just basic search and seizure and how search and seizure can differ in the school compared to outside of the school as well. So those are just some of the few classes that I touch on.
For me, I've been doing in our health classes for 8th grade at all 3 buildings. I go in and do a 2-day drugs presentation. And then just kind of trends, things to look out for, and then obviously stuff within the buildings and whatnot. And then I go into obviously the law enforcement aspect of it, consequences, tickets, arrests, and so on and so forth. And then I just started as of last school year for 6th and 7th grade. We're doing a social media awareness presentation for the health classes as well, but 6th and 7th graders. Again, just kind of making them aware of the dangers of being on social media and whatnot.
Perfect. Now, lastly, about the SRO program. This is not a position that you are typically put in. Normally, SRO is something that you really want to do, and it takes a different style of policing to be almost like a faculty member. As we wrap up this section, can you point out a little bit about kind of what this has meant to you or maybe what you've got out of it positively as a police officer?
So as a police officer, I think what I've gotten out of just being an SRO is just being a mentor to the kids, letting them see a positive role model, just being a positive role model to them.
You know, for me as an officer, a lot of times we go to calls when people are having their worst moments. So as an SRO, we're able to have those interactions when people are, coming to school happy, and we have those interactions with staff members, community members. So being an SRO really touches on everything that police officers deal with: investigations, the community aspect, patrolling, pretty much all of that. So that's what it really means to me.
Danny?
Yeah, just kind of what they said, and then obviously that relationship building is huge. Couldn't tell you how many of my students that have moved on from my middle schools into the high schools that still come say hi, parents as well, because a lot of the students have siblings, so they may have a brother, sister in the high school, but then still back in the middle schools. So again, that relationship building aspect I think is huge, and it's a piece that I think when you're working patrol or working other divisions, you may not necessarily have as much time or ability to do that relationship building that we have here as SROs.
And kind of what he mentioned too, real quick, he talked about, students, they remember him and whatnot. You'd be surprised how many students at Matias say, "Hey, how's Officer Rios doing?" They're always asking about you. So those interactions really go a long way.
And that's a great reason why we have the middle school program, to really set the tone for not only in middle school, but once they get to high school, there's no kind of off balance because they're not used to presence of law enforcement in the school, and they really see them more as Ray pointed out, as a mentor, as a faculty member, as someone that's a trusted adult that they can go to. And that's one of the reasons why we have it in our schools, and especially at that level. So Tom, anything to wrap up?
No, I mean, I like how you touched on why the middle school program is important. One of the things that we have noticed coming off of the years following COVID was just the expected behavior of kids in school. And when you skipped that year and a half, however you want to look at it, when the kids came back, I think there was a lot of unidentified work that needed to be done, and a lot of that started at the middle school level, just with how to interact in school, how a child should behave, what was appropriate and not appropriate. And I think we've kind of overcome that now. So to hear you say that, the kids have siblings coming up, I'm sure they're being taught at home, they're seeing what their siblings are doing, and then they're hitting the high schools, they've got that base, that foundation of, okay, this was appropriate in middle school, it's not appropriate now, okay, and I think we're kind of, at least at our level, back to seeing what we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So every year, we conduct law enforcement drills and a number of other safety drills that are mandated through the Illinois School Safety Drill Act. We also are required to have a threat assessment team, which our district and all of our schools do, which focuses on preventing violence and eliminating the threat that may come with that violence. We certainly want to protect everyone, including students and staff that are in our schools. So our law enforcement officers that are here with us today must be involved and are very integral to our law enforcement drill, which is required by the School Safety Drill Act. So a couple things with that. We must do that within the first 90 days of school. Just so that our parents are aware, the lockdown drill must not include simulated or of an active shooter. So we do not do that. We make sure that this is trauma-informed. All of them must be announced in advance so parents will know and have the opportunity to opt out and have their child just receive a discussion off-site if needed. And they must all be age-appropriate. So we provide that training at our levels. Obviously, second and third grade is different than what we would do at the high school. So what we're going to talk with our officers now is about the law enforcement ALICE response drills that we do. We make it a big point that we push the see something, say something, and when I talk about the ALICE portion later, we'll be talking about our situational awareness and the ability to recognize when something is off and then know when to say something and who to say that to so that the appropriate party can respond. So I'll start with Ray Morris. We're from Waubonsie Valley, and tell us a little bit about the drills that you do here at Waubonsie and how you're involved with that.
Okay, so the drills that we do here, the law enforcement drills, how I like to do them is typically we'll do it, and it's coming up here pretty soon in the next month or so. I'll solicit some of my coworkers that I've worked with previously, the Community Oriented Policing Unit, as well as the other SROs to come over and help out with the drill. So what we do is it's an announced drill where the teachers will be instructing Alice on from step one to the end on what to do. And what the law enforcement officers that I have in the building are doing is they're just walking the halls, making sure that the doors are locked, there's no traffic in the hallways as these drills are being talked about in the classrooms.
Great. And as kind of I mentioned and you mentioned, we are not using simulated gunfire. We are not doing anything to scare the students. This is a discussion led with some operations to make sure they understand the appropriate actions without trying to provide some kind of trauma or
That's correct.
Induce
it's
fear.
all instruction based within the classroom.
Okay, great. Danny, can you tell us a little bit about at the middle school level?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty similar to what Officer Morris just mentioned at the middle school level as well. Just giving the students the knowledge on the different options that they are to take given the situation that arises in that particular building, whether that it be to evacuate, to lock down in a building, and if they may need to grab staplers or whatever it might be, depending on where the intruder might be, right? Again, it's giving the students the knowledge and the options that they're gonna take based on the situation. For me, I'm checking doors, right? We promote locked doors, the building exteriors, classrooms, and then another thing too, I know Officer Morris mentioned soliciting other officers, but we also have a liaison program here within the Aurora Police Department where our day shift patrol officers are assigned a particular school building from elementary up. I also ask that they come join us during our ALICE drills so that they too can get familiar with faculty and staff and then understand what it is that we do when we're conducting these safety drills.
Great.
And at Mattia, we mirror everything that Officer Morris just mentioned. I have a lot of students and staff members and even community members, or I should say parents, sometimes come and approach me about the ALICE drills because they're concerned the trauma that's going to be incorporated in these drills and how it's going to affect the school or whatnot. But these are drills that we must conduct to make sure that we're all on the same page. And after the drill, these people who had concerns come forward and say, oh, that wasn't that bad. Just like you mentioned, we're not trying to scare people. We're not coming in with fake guns. People are not going to be throwing objects at people down the hallways. So these drills are nothing that people really should be concerned about. It's just something that we have to all do to make sure that we're on the same page.
Exactly. And to echo that, we are required to do a certain number of them. 3 fire drills, a bus evacuation, severe weather. District 204 actually does severe weather twice. We're mandated to do it once. We go above and beyond that. We do one in the spring and one in the fall. So we are ready. So we view the law enforcement drill the same as any of the others. It's an emergency and crisis situation that we're trying to make sure we have the proper training. So if and when it would happen, we all understand what we're supposed to do at that time. So I thank you for doing these drills and for putting them on, as it's very valuable to our staff and students, and we want to be prepared just in case. First safety measure we're going to discuss today is the ALICE response options. As you may be aware of, ALICE stands for an acronym of Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. It's really broken down into two segments. The first is situational awareness. This is where we ask you to, all of our parents and students and staff that notice something that seems to be out of the ordinary or suspicious, to act on that, or see something, say something, as they say. We ask that an alert is given and that we inform, which means we're either alerting the police or we're alerting people within the building that there is a need to do one of the other ALICE responses to keep themselves and the students safe. So once that is completed, we go to the other response options, which include evacuation, lockdown, and counter. Now, we teach our students within this the typical lockdown, which is to close and lock the door, get out of sight, utilize the environmental objects within the room if they needed to counter. The evacuation is always a preferred method as well. We like to put time and distance between an active threat and somebody for safety. So we encourage our students to know the building and the different doorways in case they have to get out of the school to a dedicated rally point. And the last one is counter. So all of our ALICE drills and instruction is age appropriate. And it is based on K through 5 middle school and high school with an escalating level of endorsement for the counter principle. And typically the counter principle is something known as distraction. That could be loud noise, that could be yelling, that could be movement, that could be throwing objects, or it could be physically overpowering the subject. We don't endorse that for our younger students, but certainly our high school students and staff have that ability to do that as well. The next segment that we're going to discuss is the standard reunification method. Essentially, this is how we get students back to their families after a critical incident. The district has 3 contracted sites throughout Naperville and Aurora that we would use to mobilize students from an impacted school to that site. We would then notify the parents. They could come to that site and we would get them back to their families safely. We call this the standard reunification method, and the great thing about this is every school district in DuPage County is set up to use this same simple procedure. It basically involves using one of our pre-planned sites. We have people outside that greet the parents, check their IDs, have them fill out a simple form. Once that form is given to a checker, they look against our student information system to make sure that that emergency contact is the correct person to pick them up. And then we have a reunifier, and that person goes and gets the student from their assembly area, whether that's a classroom, a gymnasium, auditorium. They bring them safely down to the parent so that the parent can take those students home. If we ever have a situation that we have to use a reunification, please look for information from the school district indicating where we would have that, because there is a school-led where it may actually happen at the physical school building, and there's a district-led where it may be at one of those 3 off-campus sites. If you'd like to find out more about this, please look up I Love You Guys, which is the program that we utilize in the district. If you'd like to learn more about the standard reunification method, please check the safety page on our district website. The last segment we discussed was the standard reunification method. This occurs when we need to get the students back to their parents. And as you can imagine, this takes a lot of staff and resources. With that in mind, DuPage County and all of the school districts in it decided to start a mutual aid cooperation where we would all agree to send staff and resources to an affected area if needed. This is called DuSMART, which stands for DuPage School Mutual Aid Response Team, and is new for this school year. If we had a critical incident in one of our districts that needed extra staff members, we could call the DuPage County Office of Emergency Management Homeland Security, request whatever that may be, 10 or 20 or 30 staff members who are trained in the I Love You Guys reunification method to come out to the impacted district, if that was Indian Prairie District 204, to one of our schools to help us run that reunification method. This will hopefully segue into many other opportunities to be able to provide mutual aid just like the law enforcement and fire communities do, so that we can be prepared with like training and similar resources and staff. Many of the topics that we discussed today, as well as others, can be found on the district safety page of the Indian Prairie School District website. Thank you again for watching this video, and we hope that it provided valuable safety information for you. Remember, about working together with the safety triangle of parents, students, and staff, we can bring about a safe and secure school year.